We're now coming back from executive session, and we are going to Section C of the agenda, which is Board of Education business discussion. Mr. Spicer.
Thank you, President Miranda, members of the board. We are here this evening to have a discussion regarding the high school auditorium, possible renovation, and also we have SHP Design and Conger Construction here to also present us a little bit about the middle school construction and the displacement of the Robbins building and the weight room. So this evening, I'd like to start the program with the auditorium. At last month's board meeting, Mr. Kaufman presented the materials to you and to the community about what needs to be done to update our auditorium. The estimated price tag on that is $2.6 million. And so we are here this evening just to answer any questions for you. Mr. Kaufman is here. Charlie from SHP is here as well, who could help a little bit there as well, and potentially Conger Construction. So I will open it up to a discussion, Q&A if needed, et cetera. Jeff, of course, is here as well.
And just want to reiterate that we are discussing tonight, because of our agenda, we are only discussing the athletic facility that we refer to as the NESC and the high school auditorium, nothing else.
That is correct.
And the other thing to remind everybody is in the work session and in a couple other cases, we do not have public participation. So,
yes, sir.
since I don't see much in the way of public other than Morris. No.
No, it is live streamed, though.
So, how do we kick this off?
Well, I think, you know, we presented the materials to the board last month. There are some options, I think. You know, options are to phase in. There's options to do the renovations. I think, Josh, if you want to speak to what that could look like if we had to phase in versus if we just did it, if you will.
And Josh, while you're describing that, because I think it's going to be really important for us to clearly understand the options and the hard costs associated with each. And I don't think we can ignore the inconvenience of phased-in approach, but at the same time, let's just recognize that it's tougher to assign dollars to inconvenience. So as we move through these, I'm not going to ignore the inconvenience, but I do want to talk about what are the hard dollars in pushing, phasing, and what about doing nothing? And doing nothing means we still need to come up to code, so there's costs associated just to hit some basic requirements. So all of those things I know we've already touched on, but I'd love to revisit all that if you don't mind.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
If we do have the presentation, I think it's linked in the agenda. And I'm not going to go through the entire presentation from last month, but just to highlight, the original facility was constructed in 1989. So it's over 30 years old, about 33 years old. And quite honestly, over those 33 years, the improvements to them have been very piecemeal and somewhat Band-Aid fixes. When something broke, it was replaced, but there have not been any renovations to the facility. It is very much showing its age in terms of some of the aesthetic pieces like seats and carpet and acoustic tiles are very much showing their age or inoperable. But there are also some safety issues when it comes to rigging, lighting, some of those pieces. We have some seating capacity concerns with our productions. All of that, just to kind of address up front, the displacement piece. I've already had conversations with our drama director. One of the really great things about our new drama director, David Derringer, is that he comes from a professional acting thespian background. He has been a professional actor and director his entire life, much shorter life than mine, but he has substantial experience, and a lot of that experience is here in the Cincinnati area. So knowing that this was on the horizon, he and I had some conversations over the last few months about what would it look like if we have to shut this facility down for a short period of time, for a year, for possibly more. He has zero reservations. based primarily on his connections in the greater Cincinnati area to the fine arts and performance community. So whether that be, we've already talked about opportunities where potentially some of the universities, Northern Kentucky University, Xavier University, UC could potentially make some spaces available. He's a graduate of NKU, so he has some connections there, as well as potentially giving our students a really unique opportunity, kind of an enhanced opportunity through this to potentially perform at Cincinnati Shakespeare Memorial Hall, a professional theater, and have that experience. Certainly it would not be the same as performing in your home auditorium. It would involve designing sets that could be more mobile, because we likely would rehearse on campus, potentially in the gym, the cafeteria, something like that, and then pack up and take our sets down in the days leading up to a performance, because we couldn't afford to rent a facility like that for a week or 2 weeks. But based on those connections, he believes that we could get not just the availability that other schools may not be able to get traditionally, but also very fair pricing in renting those facilities because of those connections. Without knowing, all of those potential rental prices are very fluid, because it depends on the time of year, how many performances we would do, how long we would want to reserve the space for. I could give you numbers from $5,000 up to $50,000 depending on the facility and the amount of time. But we have very few reservations about that. We also have connections with West Claremont, for example, who has a new auditorium that if we scheduled our season in a way that we could fit it into their facility, that could be an opportunity. So of all of the concerns with the facility, I anticipated that being a major one, and our drama director kind of looked at it and said, we can make that work. Could be an opportunity for some creative shows or some creative staging of shows in the cafeteria or in the gym, potentially where we wouldn't have to go off-site, where we could do some kind of temporary fixes. We anticipate that, no matter how we go about this, there are certainly some pieces of this that really need to be addressed immediately, that are safety concerns for our students and staff. But depending on how we go about this, the facility could be shut down for, a month or two, or probably no longer than a year, I think is our best measure, potentially shorter, depending on when we start and when we can get materials and labor on site. But just to kind of recap, I'm just going to hit on the big categories. The stage rigging systems, those are the most pressing need. Those really need to be addressed sooner than later. They were identified as safety concerns. We're still waiting on some additional feedback on how critical those safety concerns are, how pressing those are. We know they need to be addressed, but do they need to be addressed in the next month or in the next 6 to 12 months? We're still waiting on some of that. The stage lighting system needs some improvement and some work, somewhat connected to the rigging system, because the rigging system that holds the curtains and the lights are all kind of intertwined. The AV systems throughout the facility, the architectural systems, which would include making the facility ADA compliant. Right now, we get by with it, but as I mentioned last month, there's really no direct access to our stage for anyone in a wheelchair. They actually have to leave the facility, go around, and come in from a different entrance. Acoustical systems, making sure that the sound system that's in that facility works to its best potential. Potentially recapturing the orchestra pit filler, or the pit area. That would enable us to capture a significant number of seats. The best estimate by the individual that did the assessment was that we could capture, I believe it was, I don't want to misspeak here, let me find my slide here, but I believe it was 50 to, or 5 rows, I think. 50 to 70 seats, which would enable us to have class meetings at the high school, but would also, we did sell out all the productions of The Little Mermaid back in February, so that would be a huge, huge win for us. Could create some creative options for our program as well. Theater seating is very much an issue. The seats do not work. The electrical systems are all kind of intertwined. And then there are also the project soft costs and conceptual project costs that are embedded in that. One of my reservations or concerns, or something I would ask the board to really consider, is, 30, 40 years ago, a theater was a box, and there were some speakers, and there were very little. I remember performances when I was in high school, and there were no microphones being used. That's the standard now. Microphones are being used. The lighting has become so much more robust. Doing this project over, the longer that this project encompasses, the more difficult I believe it will be to integrate the systems. So for example, if we were to do, if we did a 10-year plan and we were to install a new sound system in year 1, but not address the lighting until year 10, the ability of those systems to talk to each other and work the way they should is going to be reduced. And at that point, we're potentially talking about getting into a cycle of kind of replacing some of these pieces so that that integration works a little bit better. That is my biggest concern about, spreading it out.
Josh, remind me, what are we spending now? Because every time we do a show, we bring in lighting or sound, like we're renting some items as fillers just to like even do the shows we do now.
Yeah, it's not for every show, but it is depending on the show and what we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish creatively in the space. It has been no less than, I want to say, $500, but up to about $5,000 per show to rent lighting. To address some of the deficiencies that our system does not have. Typically, those are fixtures. We've been able to kind of, I don't want to say hotwire, that make people nervous, but we've been able to make our lighting control board work. It's really beyond its capacity, but we've been able to make it work. Finding serviceable parts for it and labor has become incredibly challenging. But yes, you are right. Not only that, but from time to time, depending on the cast and the ensemble, we've had to rent microphones just to fill out enough of the roles.
You talked a little bit about the displacement of drama and how that would be solved. Is there anyone else that currently uses the auditorium that would be displaced?
Yes, there is. There are a few other, drama being the most significant. All of our drama classes at the high school are taught out of the auditorium. That is a best practice for a high school theater program. However, that is relatively new history to Milford High School. That began 5 years ago. Drama classes were moved into the auditorium. Prior to that, they took place in classrooms. So that could be accomplished during that period of time, certainly. That would be something that the high school administrative team would have to schedule around, but it's been done recently in the past. It could certainly be done again. The high school also uses it for study halls during the lunch period. So typically at the high school, study halls it can be quite large, really to reduce the number of staff members to supervise those students so the teachers can be teaching. So, a study hall could be in the cafeteria with 150, sometimes 200 students, and maybe 2 or 3 staff members, because they can really cover that whole ground, where if it's in a classroom, you've got 1 teacher per 25 kids. During the lunch periods, they cannot use the cafeteria. So during the lunch period, study halls are displaced into the auditorium. Again, some scheduling work could be done to kind of circumnavigate that. Other than that, we do have the junior high musical takes place in there. That's typically 2 nights in the spring. We could, again, work around that. Faculty meetings take place in the auditorium. That's an easy move to the cafeteria or another facility. Class meetings, they try. You can typically count on about 10% of the students being out on any given day, so they can kind of try. And maybe have some students stand if that's necessary. And then our choir concerts are in the auditorium. For a period of time, choir certainly could displace to the gym where we have our band concerts. Or again, we could look at a creative option of taking them off-site and giving them an opportunity to perform in a professional venue. That experience is something that, as a fine arts department, we've been looking at really hard, even absent this project, is what does it look like to give our band, choir, and drama an opportunity to perform in a professional space. Our band's going to perform down at CCM in January in their auditorium. That's just an incredible experience for them.
So it's fair to say it's a multi-purpose.
It is, yep. Yeah, I would say, if I had to put a number on it, I'd say 60 to 70% of the usage is drama related, but certainly the other 30%, which is a big lift, is multi-purpose.
You also have, as you get toward the end of the year, you also have a lot of awards and
We do. Thank you for bringing that up.
things like that
Yes.
in there as well. I think I attended 3 or 4 myself this year.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. The senior convocation is in there. Senior awards night takes place in the auditorium. So some of those year-end things, if it's an entire, when they do like underclass awards, they do those in the gym because they will have hundreds of students in there that just can't fit. But yes, you are correct. I know that periodically it's also used maybe for athletic signings if Mr. Zupka's got a large group. Military signing day took place in the auditorium this year, so we could generate a list of 100 different uses for it, but those were just some of the quick regular uses.
Can you talk a little bit about the timing? I know you said it could take 1 to 2 months to no longer than a year, but obviously that's working with when this is approved and everything like that. Can you walk us through like a little more detail about that?
Yeah, and when I say, I should have been a little clear. When I say 1 to 2 months, it would be 1 to 2 months multiple times.
Okay.
I don't think in any world we could knock this project out in 1 to 2 months, but it's potentially a couple weeks or a month or two this year, and then 2 or 3 years, another month or two there, versus doing it all at once. You know, I think the most important thing for the program and for the high school and their uses would be lead time. Having enough lead time to, for example, if we were going to take this year's fall production, I'm not implying that we are, but if we were going to, we really need to be working on that right away to find a space. Do you have something to add, Jeff?
I knew as soon as you started talking about lead times that Johnson was going to stand up and address that.
Charlie could chime in maybe a little bit better. We've talked a little bit about it. You know, if you were to do this whole project all at once, we would need 6 to 9 months to design it, and then probably 6 to 9 months to build it. Now, obviously, the 6 to 9 months of designing it, we're not displacing anybody. You know, that would start once construction would start. But I think we could probably get this project done in 6 to 9 months, and depending on how timing works out, you know, it would be great that, like, the tail end of that 6 to 9 months is the 2.5 months of summer, when nobody would be in there anyway. So from a timing perspective, to do it all at once, that's kind of what you're looking at. The one other thing that I want to remind the board, and I don't know if you can find it, there's a slide in there, I think, that shows it broken down over a 10-year period, as opposed to just kind of the different areas. Keep in mind that construction inflation is running around 9% a year, Bob, 10%? 15%. So, you know, if you look at a 10-year plan, you know, these numbers are, all right, we're going to do it today. Well, add 15% onto year 2, add 15, you know, and it compounds itself. So, you know, if this plan were to go over a 10-year cycle, and I agree with Josh that one of my biggest concerns about the integration of systems over a longer period of time, but every year that some or all of this gets pushed back, the price tag just keeps going up. So I think that's, if we take 10 years to do this, it's going to cost a lot more than $2.6 million.
And in terms of displacement, you know, Jeff talked about a 6 to 9 month timeline. You know, ideally, we would love to capture the 3 months of summer when the facility's relatively empty. Those could be the first 3 months, the last 3 months, those could be the middle 3 months of the project. You know, one scenario could be that the project kicks off as soon as the last high school event ends in May, and then those 6 months carry through November. Typically by then, we've only had one drama performance in the auditorium, and then we usually do a show between Thanksgiving and winter break. So that would really involve only displacing one show, or we design a season knowing that that's coming, where maybe we do a more intense spring when the project's finished. So we could design a season that really, it reconfigures our season, but it doesn't displace our drama program.
So Jeff or Charlie, when we think about the lifespan of an auditorium, I have to believe there's data or information that says if schools have built auditoriums 20 or 30 years ago, they have a normal upgrade/lifespan, and we either retro or we build a brand new school. I have to believe there's something there that can help us lean on. Are we so far beyond the normal usage of this auditorium that we're really putting Band-Aids on a bad wound, and we really need to reconsider how we're approaching this?
I mean, yeah, there's life cycle. You know, one of the things about an auditorium, there's a lot of technology, and like Josh said, there's a lot more technology in an auditorium today than there was 30 years ago. And I think we all recognize that technology, the rate of change within technology is a little more significant than maybe in some other areas of building construction and things like that. You know, the lighting systems that are available today and the cost of those lighting systems today compared to 10 or 20 years ago are vastly different. And quite honestly, they're going to be vastly different 10 or 20 years from now. That rate of change is going to keep coming. I do think it's something where, if we do this, you keep looking at, all right, how do we take off chunks, instead of, all right, we're going to do this and spend $2.6 million, and then we're going to, and I don't want to make it sound like we've not done anything. The soundboard was replaced, I don't know, it was done 6 or 7 years ago, and then we redid it again 2 years ago. The house lighting was redone. It's all LED house lighting. We've done things in that auditorium. Have we done a $250,000 project in there since I've been here? No, we haven't. But I think you look at that and develop that life cycle approach of how we do this. I would not suggest we spend $2.6 million in the next year or two and then sit on our hands for 30 years, and whoever's here 30 years from now is asking these same questions. I think you keep up with it, and you take it off in bite-sized chunks to keep it, as much up to date as is reasonable and as we can afford.
Well, and I think, I think a little bit to your question, the structure itself is solid. The shell of the space is solid. It's not broken, it's not in disrepair, it's not, it's solid. But there are some things that space will never accomplish. That space will never hold more than 525 people, ever. It's landlocked within the building, it cannot be expanded. So if there was ever, if it was ever the board's desire, the community's desire to have an auditorium that would hold 1,000 people, that space is not ever going to work for that. But within that space, I think that we can do some things to build it out for the long haul. I don't know what the lifespan of an auditorium per se is, but I think one thing is, however we go about this project, it's incumbent upon us to be good stewards of the project and moving forward to be good stewards of the facility so that we're not again in 25 or 30 years coming back saying, here we go again. It might be every 5 years saying we do need to do a smaller upgrade to our sound or to our lighting to stay out of a massive $2.6 million project.
I think this is a good heavy medium. You mentioned, this will never hold 1,000 people. They could be cognizant of the community voted on that, and they didn't want that. So then we go to what we have, and undeniably it needs to be updated. So I think it's all valid points. It is cheaper to do it all at once and less displacement and stuff just happening occurs. So keeping in mind that we did vote against a new.
Yep.
I do have another question about timing. I know you said you were going to follow up and ask some questions about the stage rigging system and what the safety concerns were there. What exactly our timeline is on that. Knowing that is a safety concern, when would you need an answer from the board as to when we're moving forward with this?
We did meet with a local rigging contractor, for lack of a better term. They have been out. They've taken a look at what we've got. I'm still waiting on getting a quote back from them. I basically said, come in and, tell me what I need to do, tell me how much it would cost that we could we'd go to the community and say it's safe. Obviously, if we're going to redo the whole thing, I want to spend any more money than we need to do that, because that will eventually come out. If it's $15,000, if it's $30,000, I don't know, but it's basically replacing the chains and the things like that are holding stuff up with certified materials that we know will hold. And I'm still waiting on that quote to come back, and I was actually just reminded of myself I need to follow up with them because I should have had the quote back by now, but I have not seen it. So we are working on that, in order to make sure that when we move in the fall that it'll be a safe place for the kids, regardless of what the board decides to do moving forward.
And that needs to be done either way, whether.
That is correct.
That needs to be done either way, because it needs to be safe for this duration of the next 6 to 9 months before we start.
No, that's correct.
Rebuilding.
That's correct.
Yeah, the question is, do we kind of patch it now, as we've been doing over the past, and then potentially take that patch off or out and have spent that money on the patch and not necessarily get it back other than recapturing the facility for maybe a year? Or do we go after it and make sure that what we put in sooner than later is enough to accomplish the long-term goals?
So are there project management costs that are not included in this? Like, will someone lead this project, and it sounds like they will. Are those included? It's you. Correct?
Yep.
It's a bargain.
No doubt. No doubt.
If I remember, I don't have everything memorized, but I do believe that there were some soft costs included in
Yes,
his
this-
estimates.
I think we're missing a number on that total, because this total has, all of those pieces are 279, and then 15%, 341,000 gets us to this 261.
The salt cost is the design, insurance, and bidding it out.
Yeah, if you look within each area, there's definitely some contingency money that's in here.
And the reason, Mr. Chestnut, that it wasn't included as a separate line item is because in the assessment that we received, there were chunks of it for each of those portions. So it wasn't
Well,
kind of a standalone.
this is that.
Yeah,
This is that same one, missing one line, though. Like, those prices are the same as this.
They are not?
They are.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, they are, but
But
missing
if you
this-
look at the
Yeah.
detailed breakdown in the report, you know, there's 15% contingency. There are some project management, shop drawing coordination, some costs like that. The one thing that's probably not in there that would be a bit of an additional cost is if we do it all together, your architectural and engineering fees are gonna be a little more significant because we're coming in, we've got to get, bid packages put together that we put out on the street so that people can bid it, as opposed to going out to a couple of individual contractors and say, this is what we want, kind of almost like a design build type situation where, so you're probably going to have some more design costs that aren't included in that. But there are some contingencies built in, and there's some stuff in there that also I think can come out. You know, there were some recommendations that are included in these numbers that I don't know that we would really proceed with and do. Some things with the Fly Center, and certainly wouldn't need to be a part of this project that, you know, as far as trying to keep it, you know, close to that 2.6 million, we'd get pretty close.
Do we have any limitations on, you know, Aaron brought up some of the ways that we're trying to put a video board in the football stadium, which I think was phenomenal. Do we have any limitations here towards going to the community and having anyone sponsor a segment of this, this project to reduce these costs even further? I don't know. I've seen other school districts, especially in the private school world, where they do a lot of their funding through donations and marquee management, et cetera, and I'm just not sure if we've even attempted that.
We actually began that just this past spring. So Cincinnati Shakespeare is an official sponsor of our program, Cincinnati Shakespeare Theater downtown. We're going to hang a banner up, and they're going to, I think, $500 a show they're going to kick our way, which is fantastic. Unfortunately, in the arts world, they tend to be not-for-profit or nonprofit, and do not necessarily have the same funds that, you know, God bless Mercy Health for all they've done for the district, but they tend to be more focused on the athletic side of things. So certainly an area to pursue, but is a little bit unconventional in the school theater world. Typically, it's more nickel and dime kind of sponsorships from parents or grandparents, or, you know, sign up for our Walk of Fame and for $25, and it's kind of nickel and dime here or there. But in terms of large kind of corporate sponsorships or donations, to my knowledge, in the public school realm, that does not exist. It's kind of uncharted waters.
But we could then rent it out for
Yes.
dance recitals
Yes.
or.
I'm glad you brought that up. I think you brought that up last meeting. You know, unfortunately, our theater our auditorium does not get rented, typically. And all of these reasons here are the reasons why. You know, Milford Youth Theater is a wonderful organization. Our systems, they don't work for what they would like. So it does absolutely increase the opportunity for that. And that potentially could be a revenue stream that would provide for the ongoing maintenance and renovation of the space over time.
Yeah, my thought wasn't even corporate sponsorships as much as it was private,
Okay.
private donors that want to call it the insert my last name auditorium. Those happen all over the country.
They do,
This isn't
yeah.
unheard of.
Yes, yes.
And unless we at least make an attempt to say it's out there, I think we may be missing something. I just think it's probably an effort that we should make.
Yeah,
No harm, no foul if we don't get anyone to sign up, and if we do, to be clear, this is all coming out of the general fund if we pay this up front, correct, Brian? So this is not
yes.
funded by the
Yes.
revenue of the
Specifically
bond.
the-
This is general fund dollars, so.
Specifically as it relates to the drama program itself, it's an entirely extracurricular program that funds their productions. They work off a zero-based budget. They can only spend the money that they earn through their productions. So it's not like they're sitting on a pile of cash that they could potentially throw towards this. I love that idea. I think if there are some great philanthropic people in the community, lovers of the arts, I encourage them to get in touch with me. That would be a tremendous opportunity.
Well, we did have somebody for choir make a generous
We did.
donation last
We
year.
did.
So, I
And
mean,
I'm a firm believer, and sometimes all you have to do is ask. And that's what happened. The choir, back in the fall, their audio system needed to be replaced. It was about $10,000, and choir does not have $10,000 sitting in a rainy day fund to put towards something like that. I encourage the director to, at the end of a concert, just stand up and just say, hey, we'd really like, you heard our audio equipment tonight, could certainly be improved. It's a big ask, if anybody is willing to kick towards that, and we had an anonymous donor that stepped up and took care of the entire system. So I am a big, so this is the first of potentially many asks. If anyone in the community is interested, I would love to talk to them.
We have a hyper-talented comms director on board now that might be able to help us get that message out to the community, to see who may be interested. The answer may be very little, if any, but I would love to try to reduce that number for the district. And there's probably some examples that our construction team may be able to help us with, and because we can pick up the phone and talk to some of these schools and see exactly how they went about garnering some sort of interest in a sponsorship. You guys will help us with that, right?
One of the questions that I have is, what have we looked at for value engineering? I mean, is there something we can do, get the same thing accomplished for less money?
Everything in the assessment, I believe, I don't know how firm those numbers are, Jeff. I believe that those are pretty close estimates, but they're not necessarily the contractors we would use or some of those things. So some of those prices could fluctuate, ideally down.
The answer is yes and no. We haven't dove deep into it. I do know we've talked about it, and there were some suggestions where there's pricing included. It's like, I don't know that we need to do that, or maybe that could be something that would follow 2 or 3 years later, that's not as technical. And, you know, there was some pricing and some discussion about doing some stuff like with a marquee and, you know, kind of making, you know, big sign for the auditorium and doing something in the Fly Center, and we wouldn't necessarily have to do that. Just like any project, you know, once you kind of start with this high-level budget that's put together, you know, and then, you know, if you get the go-ahead, absolutely, that's something you go in and you start value engineering. Do we really need to do this? Is this price? And I can tell you, you know, we're going to get into the nest a little bit later. You know, some things go down, some things go up. You know, overall price, you know, it might go up, might go down. You know, that you start drilling down into those things, and you start asking people what they want, and then you start balance that against your budget. What can you afford? I mean, it's a pretty significant, you know, process. There's a reason it's going to take 6 to 9 months to get something like this designed, because there's a pretty extensive process to go through to make sure we're getting what we need, but we're not paying for stuff we don't, or we're not overpaying. You know, we don't necessarily need the Cadillac every place, and, you know, that's a pretty extensive process.
Well, I typically harp on 3 things. One is going to be value engineering, which I've already done. The second one is what Jerry was discussing from my days back in the athletic boosters. If we get more people involved in handling some of the costs, the better off you are. You know, we used to buy something for $15,000, and the boosters would throw in 5,000, somebody else would throw in 5,000, somebody else would throw in 5,000. You got 3 times for the amount of money that we were trying to spend. So that's the second thing. The third thing is probably for 5 years, this doesn't apply, but somewhere down the road, not too far down the road, you got to budget for the future. I mean, you can't wait until everything's, I don't want to say on its last leg, but a little further and a little more aged than we would like it to be before we start thinking about doing something about it. And I think we need to try to figure out a budget for what would that look like if this is a 30-year life on a project. Then you gotta figure out how much money you need to keep it running or to be able to replace it at the end. And not replace it all at one time, but replace, maybe one year you're replacing the acoustical system, or the acoustics and the lights if they go together. But those are the types of things that we just can't let sit until we've got another situation, so.
President Miranda, this is how we got here. We asked, Jeff and I, working on a capital plan, spoke with Josh about coming up with a 5-year capital plan for the auditorium, and then we got this. So it was a lot different than what we thought it might be. And so that is in the forefront of our minds about making sure that there is a capital plan for the future should this project go forward as is. But if not, there's a plan to replace some of the things, and we'll just have to do what we have to do. But that's how we got here tonight.
It's like the turf project over there, and again, I'm gonna go back to athletics because it's kind of what I was most involved in. When we did the turf, we paid for the turf one time, and then the rentals are going into an account, so 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road, when we have to replace the turf at the stadium, the money is gonna be there, and we're not going to be doing things. So we need to try to come up with some way of doing something along those lines so we don't get hit with that big balloon cost at the end.
Yep. Thank you. Any other questions for Josh Kaufman?
Are we talking next steps at the very end after?
I
all
think
at
we
once?
could. I think auditorium. We should talk about what you all are thinking, and this is not a vote. We're not voting on anything tonight, but certainly, what I think each of you would be great if we could hear, what you're thinking about this particular assessment and next steps.
Jeff, I don't think you'll be seated very long.
There's some chairs right here.
Josh, and either of you, what's the must-do cost? Because there's some safety issues here that we
Yeah.
have to address. And at a bare bones minimum, how much is it gonna cost to at least get us to where we've got serviceable Band-Aids hanging off of this?
The first line item, I believe, covers those immediate pressing costs, the stage rigging.
Isn't the ADA compliance also a must?
No.
Once you start moving seats, it becomes a must. right?
Yeah, Charlie could probably speak a little bit better to it than I can. You don't have to bring everything up to current ADA compliance until you start renovating things. And keep in mind, and I'm not an expert on ADA, you can get to the stage from a wheelchair, crutches, or whatever. You just have to go outside and around the hallway and come in backstage. So there is access. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it if we do this, but there's not a pressing need from a code standpoint that we would have to do the ADA. Josh is right, that first line item that says stage rigging, that's where some of the safety issues lie. Now, that price is to redo all the stage rigging, including the curtains and whatever else they've got back there. What I mentioned earlier, that we brought a contractor out to basically change out the chains and the straps and the things like that that are hanging those things so that we know they won't fall and it's not a safety issue anymore. And I'm waiting for that price to come back. I don't have that, but I think that's going to be $50,000 or less. Honestly, I think it'll probably be around 30, but I'm guessing. I just, don't quote me on that, but it will not be $170,000.
So would it be a possibility, so if we say we don't want to piecemeal it,
theoretically. I do have some concerns with, I've got a couple of concerns with doing that. One of the reasons we went and sought out the quote to just kind of make it safe is with that first of all, it's going to take some just time to figure out what we need for $170,000 to replace all that stuff. It's going to take some time to get quotes and get that ordered and get that delivered and get it here. And then my concern comes back to the compatibility issue is if we rush and we do the entire $170,000, replace all the rigging, and we haven't finished the design on the rest of the auditorium, do we know, does that mesh with what everything else is going to be? Trust me, I mean, I've been looking at the junior high for years and not wanting to spend money in that building, knowing that it's going to get torn down in the near future. There are still things that we've got to do to maintain that, to keep it safe, to keep it a viable school building for the next 3 years. And, you know, we're spending $10,000 here and $5,000 there, knowing that we're going to tear it down in 3 years, but I have to continue to do that to keep it a viable school building until that time comes. And I think that cost for fixing that rigging would kind of fall into that category.
When did we get these budgetary numbers, Joe?
May.
18.
May.
Where? Like,
Oh,
where
from
did they
this?
come from?
Harvey Marshall Burling Associates.
Okay.
Yeah.
That company designs theaters throughout the United States.
I just forgot. Last time we were in the packet. Okay.
I think that the auditorium has, in our past 20 years of fiscal, you know, like the fiscal path that the district has taken, there were concerns and we tightened belts and, you know, that was what we needed to do at the time. But I definitely think that auditorium fell by the wayside of, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. And now we're getting to, you know, the time has come. We kicked enough down the road that it worked. But I think that nothing is going to get cheaper. Inflation is not looking good anytime soon. And I would rather have a coherent system, you know, that all works as best we can with the money today and, you know, kind of bite it off and get the most out of it. It's like when you have a car, like, do I replace the tires? Do I replace, you know, like at what point do I replace the whole car? I think we need a new car. Well, the chassis is okay.
I do think the fact that this auditorium has pretty much been the same since 1989. We've gotten a lot of use out of it. And I feel like there's been a lot of work done on finding out how to price this in a fair way and really taking a deep dive into what is the best value. The comprehensive report that you all prepared for us in the FEET committee, I felt was very thorough, and I've been studying it as well. I feel like there was a lot of thought behind it. It did not seem like there was anything out of scope that was really crazy. And like you said, even the things like the marquee, those are things that we're willing to take away to make the price better for us. I also think the benefit of having a larger auditorium where we can maybe have more class meetings, and the fact that it's used by more than drama, I think that's definitely going to be something that's good for our future if we have a nice up-to-date auditorium. And then, like Emily said, the ability to have these systems work together, I think, is really important. I also think, like, when you're building something, it makes a lot of sense from a fiscal responsibility aspect to go ahead and do it all at once so that you're saving money in the long run. And I do think that Jerry brought up some good points about asking the community if they want to contribute to this. I think that would be a really good thing to look into as well.
I agree, and it's a big chunk of money, and it's been at it, but it will only get bigger. It's like doing everything in your house. Just do one, and then you do the next, and then it just costs more. So it's a big chunk that I think we got our money's worth out of the community
No doubt, no doubt. I would leave you with just two other thoughts before I kind of sit down and let you all talk. You know, or maybe three. One, you know, our drama director, myself, you know, we also have to remember that this facility is 33 years old. For 28, 29 of those years, there was no fine arts director who could be keenly involved in the regular ongoing maintenance, upkeep, and supervision of that facility. We have that now to take better care of the facility. Two, our students in the drama program work incredibly hard, and this is not about warm and fuzzies and touchy-feelies, but they've watched athletic facilities, they've watched band facilities, they've watched classroom facilities all be renovated in their lifetime, and they have not seen their facility really in a substantial way look any different than, for some of our kids, the theater that their parents performed in. And finally, just in terms of after, you know, conversations with our director and just looking at it programmatically, certainly respect however the board wants to move forward with this. Ultimately, you know, there were a lot of questions about disruption at the beginning. The least disruptive option from a programming standpoint is to do it all at once.
Ideally, you could do the 6 to 9 month plan and start like June 1st next June, and then this place is the fall.
That'd be ideal.
Ideal.
Yeah.
And you can get on somebody's schedule then.
Exactly.
Where now,
We'd be fighting for weekends or.
the only good thing about starting it in the fall is everybody else is in their theater and nobody's renovating at that point in time.
Right.
But, yeah, this thing, my recollection of having lived in this community since the 70s is when we built the school over here, we kind of got kite on money at the end, and we thrifted the theater because that was a place that we could thrift. It was better than what we had, and it got us started there. And Jeff and his predecessors have done an amazing job keeping it up and running. But in a lot of cases, we've, like Emily said, and like I say all the time, we've kicked the can down the road. We've kicked the can till there's almost no can left here, guys. Nobody wants to spend $2.5 million. They certainly didn't want to spend $5 million when we ran the bond in 2019. This is our way of coming back to the community and saying, this still has to be done. We're trying to do it at a lesser cost. We're not coming to you for the money. And like everybody said, it's not going to get any cheaper. I think that the time is now to get it done and get it done complete. And if we've got kids that have to suffer, not the same as COVID, but you had a senior class that went out of here without much fanfare. If we've got to try to find a better way to do that, we at least know that we need to do that.
And I think the students that would be impacted would be so thrilled on the back end. You know, my preference would be to displace a fall show, because then those seniors could finish their year in a, you know, renovated facility. I think almost to a student, if you asked them if they were okay with that and the payoff was a new theater, they would be thrilled.
I don't think we can lose sight that 30% of this is a multi-purpose auditorium, and 30% of it is used for something outside of drama. The majority of this country it supports athletics, and I think probably always will until my last breath. It's just the way we're wired as in America as a culture. But I think drama is a very, very important part of the fabric of all of our communities. And it's a shame that it hasn't been touched in 28 years. It really is. I mean, that's a little bit revealing for me a few weeks ago when I found that out. No one likes to spend any money sitting in this chair, but there are times when we have to take a really hard, serious look at when it is time. And, you know, we've got to do something with this space. I agree with that.
I mean, it is an educational space.
Well,
And you're sitting here, you could be sitting here with $10 million in a general fund. You're not. Now, we don't want to spend the general fund just for the sake of spending it because we've got money in there. But I think the time is now. And I'm not hearing much objection across this room, and I'm not voting for anybody. But
It's the temperature.
Yes, I
Yeah,
feel
we're-
the temperature is good. It's like 98.7.
Well, I think that, you're always gonna have people that oppose whatever the decision is, and that's expected, but I just would encourage those people to come take a tour of it.
Yeah. It's eye-opening.
Better
Thank-
yet, take a tour and see a production.
Please, yes, yes.
Just
With a big donation.
Buy a brick, buy a brick.
If I could,
It looks like the auditorium's gonna be named after you. Thank you.
if I could just recap a couple things, Jeff and I and Josh will get together. We'll have some conversation. We'll get with Charlie from SHP. I appreciate the board's comments. It's time to buy a new car. It's my house. I think that we do have experience with Cullen Electric, Aaron Zupka in the audience, securing Cullen Electric. So we do have some experience of getting sponsorships. So we can lean on Aaron as well. And then Krista will also do some of that for us. We'll see what we can get and hope for the best. And we'll report back regarding the auditorium as soon as we know more, as soon as we can. Does that sound good?
I'm expecting we're gonna go sharpen our pencils and we're gonna take a good look at this and figure out what we've got when we come back with a number.
That
would
is
be the time to do it.
Charlie's.
And I get that. and I get
Charlie
that,
and Jeff
Vegas.
will take care of that. We will get sharp numbers. The pencil will be,
I get that takes time, but can you guys do it by Thursday? No.
probably not.
Let's do
We'll
it
fast
right.
track it.
Let's do it right. We're getting in a habit of Milford over the last 5 to 10 years of doing things right and not doing it just enough to get by.
That's right.
That's the message which we should be sending to our kids, whether they're athletes, students, or fine arts people.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We'll report back as soon as we can. At this time, I think we'd like to transition this work session to Charlie. Charlie's going to hook up his machine so that he can project, and we'll have a discussion about the middle school placement on the site, and then also the displacement of the weight room in the Robbins building. And we'll just turn it over to Charlie, Jeff, and Conquer Construction.
Real quick, while Charlie's getting ready to come up here, I just want to make sure that everybody knows this process started a year and a half ago, 2 years ago?
January of 21.
January of 21. So we've been working on this, and, we started on this even before the bond issue was passed. We've been working on what this might look like. Obviously, once the bond issue passed, and you'll see some stuff that Charlie will share, that middle school is impacting, some ideas and plans even more than we anticipated even just a few months ago. So I just want to point out that this has been a process. We started with Aaron, with Josh, looking at needs, quite a long time ago, and this is kind of where we've come to. And I do want to say that because of our middle school project, Charlie and his team really kind of need to know where we're going with this very quickly, because it does impact fairly significantly the design of the middle school and how we're going to construct that. So not to put pressure, but it is kind of, things are kind of coming to a head because of where we're at with the design process of the middle school. So with that, I'll turn it over to Charlie.
Thanks, Jeff. So this has been a great process so far. As Jeff mentioned, in January, we started with a broad team of all folks representing a whole bunch of extracurriculars: wrestling, soccer, football, basketball, robotics, color guard, and we all talked about a lot of the things and the needs that those groups had. So this is, I do have football on the cover because it's adjacent to it, but it is all sports. So behind me is the current layout. It's the current condition of what we have on the site across the street. You can see in the red dashed area says buildable area. That is the buildable area for the middle school, and then a field house would be obviously adjacent to the stadium because it would support a lot of the stadium functions. You can see the Robbins building is under cover there. It's, you know, within kind of the usable footprint. The Robbins building was, I believe, constructed actually with a donation in the 80s, primarily to be used for wrestling. It's a pre-engineered metal building. It was kind of a low first cost facility. The current weight room and locker rooms, I don't know if anybody has been in those, but they're worth a tour to see how antiquated those facilities are. That was originally actually Milford's bus facility. If you look at it, you can see where their garage doors were. And I think that, if I could just guess by the architecture, it's probably the 50s or 60s. So it's, again, lived a pretty long life through the years. So if you take that into place kind of where we are as far as the footprint of the new middle school, you see right here, this represents the approximate footprint of the building today. That's about 215,000 square feet right there. So the classroom wing would be 3 stories, and then we've got a large 1-story kind of shared space. Cafeterias, gymnasiums, food service, music rooms are all on the ground floor, the office. You can also see that we're impacting the Robbins building. So right now the footprint of that building would be on top of the Robbins building. We would have to displace it or tighten the building footprint up a little bit somehow to get around it. But constructing a new building, there's going to be a lot of activity. When you think about constructing a building, there's constant circulation going around it. This is not even showing the site circulation. So when you think about driveways, drop-off sidewalks, loading, unloading of equipment during construction and then also during operations, it's a fairly tight area. You can also see the corridor for utilities. Utilities would likely are going to go back here on the building. This is the main feed for the building. So electric, gas, water, technology would all come in there. And that's a convenient location if we do decide to do something to expand to a field house. You might see another footprint up here. We've studied a lot of different variations, but we could have a field house that moves, but we would displace the current scoreboard. And it sounds like you're working potentially with a new scoreboard solution. But I have that there really for scale, where it really only is restrooms, concessions, and wrestling, and weight room would fit there. Kind of the supporting multi-purpose space would not fit. It'd have to maybe go a little further back, but it could be changed. It also, there's some efficiencies in having everything in this configuration. So the next slide really shows the floor plan that we've landed on. So in purple, you kind of see the multi-purpose room. In reality, it's 3 gym floors, about 8,000 square feet each. These would be used for gymnasium activities as far as basketball, but we've also talked a lot about having a rubber floor in there. So rubber floor could be used for baseball, for batting cages could drop from the ceiling. We've seen football teams use those on rainy days for practice. We've seen lacrosse. So we know putting a wood floor in would kind of isolate it to be gymnasium type activities, but the multi-purpose phrase and some other amenities could give it a lot more use throughout the year. This area is really strictly practice. There's not much room for seating, and I think that's the thing that is needed here is the practice time and the practice space. I'm always really surprised when I hear how few gymnasiums that this district has. A district this large generally has a lot more gymnasiums. To the right is kind of the layout that we landed on, showing a variety of locker rooms. So it would be a varsity locker room for fall sports, soccer, football. It would be varsity locker rooms for track, other spring sports that are occurring. So it would be kind of multi-use throughout the year. These 2 circles here represent 2 wrestling practice spaces. So that's basically the Robbins building scope of work. This is weight room here. There's the larger locker room, and then these are some smaller variety ones for visitors, so visitors would have space to go. And then what you see is the incredibly large men's and women's restroom, and believe it or not, that is what is required for a stadium that seats 5,000. We know that you have newer visitor seats, and there's a plan for larger home side stands in the future. And if you expand to that size, you need a lot more bathrooms than what you currently have. I know your bathrooms are woefully undersized for the capacity that you draw. And then lastly, we've got a concession space, and this would be laid out for popcorn, hot dogs, all those things, grilling out. But then we also have like an ancillary space if that wants to be for T-shirt sales or for other miscellaneous sale opportunities that come along with sporting events. So.
I didn't hear the mention of robotics in that dissertation there. Do you?
Yes, robotics could also occur within the multi-purpose space. So we're not giving a dedicated robotics room, but this is a large enough space where if we wanted to isolate a gym, we could, and robotics could occur. So that's the other beautiful thing about something this large is it could be seasonal and you know, obviously in the winters, generally when we see the most basketball use fall and into the winter. But if there's a robotics, you know, you're hosting an event and you need to set up and you need some dedicated square footage, that could happen here in the summer or spring, you know, when the gym use may be a little bit lower in use. Yeah. 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 The other thing I'll point out is the this is per code for men's and women's. Women's toilet rooms have significantly more stalls because they know throughout time that women's lines are longer. So somebody did say to me that seems like it's out of balance, but that's building code right there. So it's 35 toilets, or one toilet for every 35 women, and for men it's 50. So anyway. So here's some shots. This is a view kind of looking above. If you could imagine the current junior high is right here. This is kind of simulating the current parking lot. This is Milford High School out here, just shown in white. And kind of this brownish color is just a middle school footprint. We just put a block there when we did this study. So you can see that this building kind of has two forms. The concession, wrestling, weight rooms are kind of we'll call it a one-story form. And then the multi-purpose space is a little bit higher for volleyballs or basketballs going up. This gives us an opportunity to kind of really change the entry. I've walked the site many times and have kind of seen how Milford Stadium is somewhat of an organic growth, is the way I'll describe it. There's a lot of little facilities and sheds, and you can see in time it's works for what you need, but it could be done in a little bit more of a strategic manner. It gives us an opportunity for kind of a main street, and so you're creating kind of a gathering space kind of behind the bleachers and in between the building. Concessions have their own dedicated area here, so you kind of have two different zones. So it's, you know, somewhat, you could have tables out there and have a little more controlled environment, but yet there's still grass here, because we know there will be little middle school kids tossing football, playing catch it, you're up during a football game on Friday night. This is moving a little bit closer. Again, you guys have the great, strong brand identity, and we would want to incorporate something like that into the front gate. Here's where you come in. And that would be, you know, a source of pride for the players, but also, you know, visitors are, wow, this is an impressive house. This is a shot here kind of looking at the concession area. You know, just a couple pieces of furniture in a gathering area, and these would be the windows. We have not added other things. I have other ones where we've got steps and stairs and a lot more landscaping. We've tried to keep this pretty minimalist as far as a lot of the kit parts. These would be just some architectural lighting because of to keep it. We know a lot of the functionality happens at night. This is looking at the bleachers, and then you can kind of see that Main Street promenade. So these little screen walls here for visibility of going into the locker rooms. There's an opportunity to have some gathering space below the bleachers, and so there would be potentially some opportunity for some, you know, exterior concrete pads that are poured where they could become benches. Again, low maintenance. The building itself, we've been looking at as a pre-engineered building, but we did talk about putting brick, I believe, about 10 feet up, just for the wear and tear. Generally, when you have a facility like this and you put metal down low, you've got in balls, you've got people slinging things against it. It doesn't matter if it's tennis or soccer or baseball or lacrosse or football. So to have that hard structure around it would be a good decision for long-term wear and tear. So with that, any questions on the design, and then we can kind of review the estimate with Concord who developed that.
This is kind of building off a question that Dave had. You said that the robotics would go in the multipurpose room. Is there any consideration for storage of their supplies?
They have a lot of stuff that I'm aware of, and I know they're in the modulars right now. Storage could be added. Right now, as far as storage, there's some here, but that primarily would be, it's up for the district to decide. So.
We do have some robotics design in the new middle school. So there's 2 dedicated classrooms to that. So there's some space within that design that would allow that to happen.
Yeah, I think what we're looking at right now is that robotics kind of more permanent home would probably be in the middle school. If they had competitions and they wanted to set something up in the multipurpose area, you know, for a competition for a weekend or something like that, it would potentially be available. But they're more permanent home. We're looking at putting them in some project labs in the middle school.
Okay.
If you go back to your overhead footprint there. Yeah, come one slide forward, I'm sorry. There. Now, the middle school would be toward the bottom of the screen, correct?
Mm-hmm. Down here, yep.
And we talked about value engineering before.
Mm-hmm.
Bathrooms are pretty darn expensive,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a whole bunch of them there. Is there some way to work off of the bathrooms of the junior high, or the middle school, such that you might be able to thrift half of those bathrooms out of there and have an inside door with an outside door that locks during the school day, and then reverse them on game night?
Yeah, I like the way you think. Unfortunately, there's a travel distance, and right now, probably the location where your bathrooms now are probably exceeding the travel distance for a visitor, or for your home stands. If you're on that side here and you're walking down, you're exceeding it. It's 500 feet.
Well,
So,
I understand that.
yep,
We've been operating with about 7 or 8 portalettes for the last 20 years.
yep.
If we had, instead of having 50 bathrooms, we had 25 bathrooms, I doubt that we would get to that.
Yeah.
Code aside, I understand that.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. Your problem is going to be is that the bleachers that are over there, one of the things that, there's a lot of things that was driving, you know, starting this process of looking at this. But one of them is we had to beg, borrow, and plead the county to give us a permit to put the bleachers in on the north side of the stadium back in 17, having portalettes and not having restrooms. They will not give us a building permit to put up bleachers to replace them on the south side, which is coming due. Those are 33 years old.
Same age as the
Is the high school.
auditorium.
Same age as, the auditorium in addition to the high school. So those went in '89. We're not going to get a permit unless we've got the adequate bathrooms per code in order to be able to do that. So that's one of the big driving forces into that big, large restroom.
Is there a walking distance restriction that you can't have the bathrooms more than 30 yards from the bleachers?
It's 500, no, it's 500 feet of travel. So I can, from the furthest corner of bleachers, I could go 500 feet. So, I mean, the new building, Mr. Brander, your comment is valid. I mean, the new building is going to have a large group bathroom here.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just looking at a code plan prior to this. You know, the building is sized for 1,600 students. And so that's, you know, roughly or so about a third of what the capacity of this would be. So, and the bathrooms also in here are all spread out. So we could look at it, and right now we're just obviously, and we've got one floor plan. I did reach out to Claremont County to see if they would be willing to talk with us. This is the max toilets needed. How often are you going to be commanding that many people on site?
We don't have 6,000 people at every game.
Yeah, I realize that. So we, you know, there's times where we can call a building authority and say, hey, you know, these guys on average have 3,000, can we size it for 3,500? And if they foresee larger events, we would bring in supplemental. So, and that would be a dramatic amount of savings if we could get a green light to people.
Yes, it would.
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Is that bathroom accessible from the inside too, or like if you've got people on basketball, they're going to go outside and then go in?
Correct. It is not, it is exterior, you have to walk through the exterior, and that is strictly just saving on square footage. So, yeah. You could be in the gym and go through here, and there are locker rooms and a couple of individual bathrooms. So there is a way for coaches or players to be able to do that. So the thing is you're not, you know, you're going to be able to have a row of seats or 2 rows of seats here. You're not going to have the capacity of having 1,000 people in this gymnasium.
So I've never been to a robotics event. Do people come and watch that where you need bleachers, temporary bleachers that you need to put in there? Or-
Yeah, there would be a need, but, you know, talking with, through this design, not this specific design process, but through some of the junior high to middle school process, they're likely wanting to they'll just want to use the gym that's in the building. Yeah,
And that will have,
for competition.
you know, that'll have
is
8 or 10
what we
rows.
were told.
That'll have 8
typically.
or 10 rows of bleachers in the junior high.
And if you have practices and limited amount of people in that particular area there, then probably it is sized appropriately for the locker rooms that you've got in there.
Yeah.
So you would never have to get down to
Yeah,
the
so
far
if
end.
you know, if we had 3 teams practicing here, you know, maximum maybe 60 kids, there's enough toilets. You just heard me say the numbers. You really need about 2 toilets for that.
Yeah.
So they could go down this hallway, and there's you know,
As long as we have both genders, and I'm sure you've
Yep.
got that all
Yep.
planned out.
yep.
Anyway, I would encourage, going back to the county, they've been pretty good to us in the past, and they've waited a long time for us to get to anything close to this. I think they would be happy to check a box there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we've reached out, but unfortunately, they've had a turnover in staff there. It's all new folks, and we kind of put it on hold about a year ago. But now that your guys are engaged, we would be one of the first calls.
So Charlie, when you take a look at this design, if we told you that we can't do it, we need to carve out some of the nice to have. From your view, because it's our decision whether it's a nice to have or a need, but from your view, which part of this is a nice versus a need?
Well, in walking through the current locker rooms, weight rooms, and Robin's building, again, those facilities have lived their useful life. They're worn out, and they've been well loved, but being kind of an ancillary building, they just age differently. They don't get the custodial treatment that school classrooms get. The multi-purpose space is a nice feature, but it's growing. We're seeing a lot of communities put in these types of facilities. I live in a community that has one, and it's got turf. And the first time I toured it, they had wrestling mats on it, and they also had baseball, taking ground balls at the same time. And I thought, wow, I thought this was a football thing, but it's not. So this is growing. A lot of school districts are adding those. So it's one of those things where the blue is definitely needed as a result of the middle school. It's the purple space that you guys need to determine if you want to it's only going to be, the cost now is on the next slide. It's up to you, though.
You've got, I know in the winter, you've got, Aaron, 8 basketball teams at junior high? Is that correct? Two girls, 2 boys at every level.
You got
And-
practices kicking off at 9 o'clock, right? Like that's,
Yeah,
yeah,
when they should be home doing their homework and going to bed.
it's probably a poor
Yeah.
choice of words, kicking off, but, yeah.
Yeah, I think Josh just said that, you know, one of the things we've also got, you know, it's not just the basketball teams. I mean, we're currently shipping junior high basketball teams out to elementary schools to practice because we don't have the space at the junior high. But we also, on a nightly basis, have dance, cheerleading, color guard. I'm missing some, winter drum line, that are breaking down cafeteria tables to practice in the cafeteria. If you go into our cafeteria right now at the high school, I'm going to exaggerate to make a point, but it kind of looks like a golf ball because of the tile and the beating that it's kind of taking in there. So it's not just basketball, it's not just volleyball in the fall. It's off-season workouts. It's, like I said, it's color guard, winter drum line, dance, cheer. I mean, I don't know how many cheer and dance teams we've got, Aaron, but there's a lot of them. You know, and that's where I see this extra space potentially being used for, you know, a lot of other, yeah, I think we'll have basketball practice in there, but I also think we'll have other things. I think, you know, junior high wrestling might have some space in there sometimes. There's a lot of coordination, but there's a lot of activities, sports, extracurriculars that could really utilize that space. Now, I don't disagree with Charlie. The other areas between the bathrooms and replacing the Robbins building and the current weight room and locker room over there, and the square footage in this blue area, other than the bathrooms, which are new, obviously, but the rest of it is basically just replacing what we've got now. It's not an expansion, it's not more space, it's just replacing what we currently have.
Well, if anyone's ever walked through that weight room, I have several times, I would call it borderline dangerous. It's amazing these kids are able to still stay in shape, keep their workouts together, and
When I was a student here, that was the bus garage.
in the 60s, or
I was a 60.
Jeff, you know I know when you graduated. I'm messing with you.
He shared it with dinosaurs.
Flintstone.
Well, and the other thing is, and I apologize, I had to step out. I'm assuming Charlie mentioned it. In addition to the fact that those buildings are at end of life, without a doubt in my mind, this new middle school is going to displace them. We're going to have to get rid of them in order to build the new middle school. That building, it's showing you cutting out the Robbins building, but the reality is, from a stormwater detention basis, in order to save money on doing that plan right there with that building where it's at, we probably have to do underground stormwater detention, which is really expensive. So that building, and we're not there 100% yet, but I think there's a pretty good chance that building needs to move to the east even farther than it is right there in that rendering, which means not only is it taking out the Robbins building, it's probably going to take out the weight room as well.
Yeah, you got about 15 foot between the Robbins building and the weight room.
Well, oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Does any of this price tag come out of the bond?
No,
No.
this is completely separate from the bond.
That's the only thing that's a little bit of a look back for me, is just making sure that everyone knew when the bond passed, they knew that it wasn't going to rebuild this, but that it actually, the new school would displace these two, because this is another, let's just call it $10 million worth of expense cost to the district that I don't know if our community understood when the vote for the bond happened. But we can't look back, we can't turn back the clock. I guess I'm just stating a little bit more revelation in the obvious, that this is a cost that's there, because one of the first things I asked you about this was, are those two buildings going to have to go? And you said, I don't know, but it looks like it might be possible, and I got a pit in my stomach, because it's a $10 million pit.
Well, and when we put the bond issue on, I mean, we didn't, what's that footprint going to look like? Exactly where is it going to go?
Right.
I couldn't have told you in 2020, yes, it's going to displace them. It could. It's going to be close. I knew it would be close.
Sure.
I knew you'd have those, 40 to 60-year-old plus buildings sitting right next to a brand-new middle school. I didn't know if it would actually displace them. And as we've designed this, gone through this process and started to talk about things like stormwater detention, which, go over and look at the soccer field and see what kind of a stormwater detention basin I got to build for a soccer field. It's going to pale in comparison when we put in the middle school. So that's significant, and those are some things that are coming out through the design process.
Is this $2 million for the bleachers? That's over and above the $10
That is over and above, that.
Looking at 12 million plus the almost 3 million for the theater. So the 2022 community is looking at $15 million
Yeah,
of upgrades. It's unfortunate that all of these things have come to their expiration date all at once.
And just like a lot of the other things we've talked about tonight, we're talking about, you know, the design that Congress put some pricing together. I actually reached out to Dan Clayton, who's the contractor who did the bleachers on the north side, big high school college bleacher company. He emailed me today and he said 1.6 to 1.9. But a lot of that's going to flesh out just like this. If you go back to that design, you know, the floor plan, I mean, Congress pricing it off of that. You know, we've talked a little bit about materials, but not a tremendous amount. That's one of the reasons there's some decent contingency money in there. You know, can we try to, you know, Mr. Miranda's mentioned value engineering a number of times. You know, we've already talked about doing, you know, when we met a week or two ago, kind of looked at the beginnings of this budget or this estimate, you know, Congress figured wood floors. I said, no, we don't want wood floors. It needs to be a multi-purpose floor, partially for cost, partially for just the use. And, you know, we will continue to do things like that. But this is still a very high-level design, and I think there's opportunity to value engineer and get some square foot pricing down. But there's also, I mean, we've talked about it a number of times, and you guys have seen it. You know, the inflationary pressures of the construction industry are even higher than what we're all seeing at the gas pump and the grocery store and things like that. So that's a concern on that side. I mean, we bumped up the HVAC square foot estimate a couple days ago because of some of the inflationary pressures that we're seeing in that particular market. So, you know, I don't think this is a fat estimate. I hope, Bob's kicking me because, you know, I'm gonna, you know, but I think it's, I don't know, a conservative estimate, a safe estimate, and I'm hopeful that we could get it for cheaper than what it's sitting at up there. But again, the way the construction industry is going right now, I'm afraid that I'd come back to you guys in 6 months and say, was it 254 square foot, 275 a square foot? You know, that's, I don't know.
Just to give you a little reference, we have a 15,000 square foot Granger metal building that's getting ready to start construction now. It's 15,000 square feet at $3 million as of today's cost right now. It's a 1/3 office, 2/3 warehouse. Leaving the warehouse space is a little lighter than what the multi-purpose would be here. The office is probably fairly comparable to what Ranger side is as far as level finishes, and the restrooms here, plumbing is higher, but the level of finishes in the office space is higher, so it's probably about the same. So it's about $3 million for 15,000 square feet. So take that times
200.
Simple math, you're at $9 million. Here we have some contingencies built into it. There's more exterior plaza work going on with this. So that, you know, just give you a framework of where these are now, where this could be at 45,000 square foot.
Well, the thought that I have in my mind is that I was here, and you were just coming on, Jeff, at the end of the project where we did a lot of work out here over at the high school, building the new wings, and we also did some athletic stuff at the same time. The fact that we've got earth movers and plumbers and all those people there at the middle school, and you're talking about less than 100 foot away is another building that they could potentially work on. There's got to be a fair, you know, I won't say a fair amount. There's got to be some savings available to us because they've already got the equipment here. They've already got the people here.
Yeah, Bob could probably come up and talk that a little bit even more detailed than I am. It's definitely there. You know, there's mobilization costs that you save. I think it's kind of hard to put a hard number on percentage on that, but it's definitely there. I don't know if you want to add something.
Before you start, I'm sorry I'm squeezing so hard.
Oh, no problem.
But-
The bigger side of it would be that if this happens around the same time that we get the middle school out of the ground, there's great competition in putting these together. So the contractors that are going to be bidding on the middle school will obviously be bidding on the nest as well. So there's a competition there that this is priced as its own building away from the middle school. And then you saw the line on there. Every year after that, if it's done by itself, the state of Ohio is saying there's about a 15% inflation added onto that. In 2019 to 2021, it went up 17%, and then 17%, and then 2021 to 2022, it went up another 14% in 1 year. So you're 31% over 3 years in just that time. There is a lot of competition with this that could be saved in some of those areas by doing it at the same time as the middle school, to your point.
Is that,
Sounds like a good business to get into.
you know, it sound,
Yes.
you know, any number is mud thrown at the wall. Is that, are we talking 5%, 10%?
I wouldn't say
1%?
5 to 10, but I'd say 1 to 3
Okay.
in that range
So
would be fair.
when I look at this, obviously the pictures look beautiful. Who wouldn't want this bright, shiny, new, awesome place? I get that. And I understand the need. So to speak, the need by moving the school and displacing things. But I'll tell you what doesn't sit well with me. I totally bought into the theater renovation. I feel like it's time is due. It's the most cost effective to do it all at once. But with this, I feel like we're kind of sliding in this $12 million add-on. To Jerry's point, that I don't know the community understood that this $12 million cost was going to come right after they voted yes for a junior high. So that's the part that doesn't sit well totally with me, even though I completely understand, hey, we put this junior high here and it displaces and then all of this stuff is old, but I kind of feel like we're pushing it in after the fact.
I think it falls in with, I mean, we have used the weight room and the Robbins room well past their, I don't know what their intended life was, but if we look at other facilities in any other Claremont County, like when I go to New Richmond for Special Olympics, which we can't host here right now, but perhaps we could, you know, once we had restrooms, our facilities pale in comparison. I mean, the concessions, I mean, not even talking about the bathrooms, but we have, as a district, just like we held on to this car of an auditorium, you know, we've been holding on and being very fiscally conservative, which I think is what we needed to do and is an okay thing. And we came back after you know, they said, not this big bond, figure out some other way. So this is the figuring out some other way. It is a big chunk of change, but I also think it's a shame that the wrestling room and the weight room and the toilets.
I just wish we kind of would have put that out ahead, like with the bond moment, like, hey, we're gonna vote in junior high, but with this cost comes the $12 million add-on.
Well,
But I don't think we knew that then, and I think that's what's important. Nobody's slipping anything through, no one's trying to get anything past voters. This is a direct result of the design and the footprint of that building. Has nothing to do with trying to get anything past anyone or slip one in, and so
As a consequence of that, you know, it's just a sequence of events.
sure. But I want to make sure that people know that. Nobody's trying to slip anything by anybody. The board could decide that we're not doing anything with this, but then that becomes Jeff and John's problem to find out where we're going to put a weight room and wrestling.
Well, and I completely understand what you're saying, and I do understand the optics of that to a certain extent. Like I said earlier, we began talking about this potential project before the bond issue passed. I mean, we were talking about the bond issue coming up, but we started talking about this before the bond issue was passed. When, back in 2019, you know, both before the bond issue and even after, I can remember numerous times being, well, what happens if the bond issue doesn't pass? Well, some of these things the district is going to have to figure out how to address whether the bond issue passes or not, because it has to be addressed. This was one of those areas, was, you know, back in 2018, 19, we knew you know, and that's one of the reasons that this was included in that bond issue. Obviously, the voters turned it down, and, you know, we listened to them, and that's why we didn't put it in the next bond issue. But we knew that some of these areas were going to need to be addressed. The roofs at the high school, we've talked about, you know, we're doing a big patch on it and talking about some other pieces of the high school roof. So several of those areas that were in the 2019 bond that was rejected are still areas that the district needs to look at and needs to address. Now, the fact that there's some ramifications on the design of the middle school that maybe accelerates a decision needing to be made, that's something that we couldn't really see and that the middle school design is affecting. But that's more of a, how quickly do we need to decide, as opposed to we need to do something eventually from the way I see it, so.
And even if these buildings were 40 feet outside the buildable area, there's also, they're disgusting looking buildings. If we have this really nice new campus where, you know, parts of the high school and all of the middle school have been redone, and then we have these two blobs.
No, I agree with that. I agree that, you know, you're in this nice new school and their stuff is antiquated. It just, part of it's the, I wish we would have just put it, like you mentioned, it was in the old big bond and the community turned it down, so we put a little bond, but then we still have to.
Is it an option to not do the purple? I mean, the blue is the need to have, right? We're replacing buildings. If we didn't do purple, does that take this whole cost off right now?
Yeah, it would take off,
It's divided into, so at the top you have the multipurpose room on the left and the wrestling section on the right.
So it takes off $4 million from the total.
It's about a 60-40% of cost.
correct.
And then at a later,
Later? You could do an addition later?
Yes, anything's possible. You could do it later. Obviously, the cost would be more expensive to do it later than doing it now, but that could easily be added on.
but the cost will be more and we'll end up tearing up some of the work that we're doing now.
The cost will go up not only from the escalation of material, but just the ease of access to
Right.
get back to it.
So-
You're
so-
cutting off that one side.
So Brian, currently, how much is in our general fund? 41?
Yeah, we ended roughly $40 million we ended June with.
40, okay.
Right.
And 100% of these costs are coming out of that, correct?
Correct.
So if I add up everything, 10 million for the nest, it's a little north of 10. 2.5 for the auditorium, that's with a little haircut. Jeff, you can help us out, take a little bit out of that. That's 12.5 plus the bleachers of 2, that's $14.5 million minus 41 or 40 million, correct?
Correct.
So one of the questions that I have is that delta that's left in the general fund, how does that make you feel as our treasurer?
A little nervous, because obviously you're taking a big chunk out of there. You know, obviously, as we move forward, you know, we talked about going into deficit spending. The deficit spending, the cash balance that we had is helping us offset some of that deficit spending. So you take a big chunk of that cash out, you're getting to the point where you got to go to the ballot a little bit quicker. When you look at this project, you know, is there, you know, we've had a conversation with our advisor as well as bond counsel to see if, okay, can you fund some of this out of the general fund and then possibly finance some of it? And what does that look like? So that's kind of what we're playing with now. Once we get a better temperature of where the board wants to go with it, then we can start digging into that a little bit deeper as far as what do we feel comfortable taking out right now versus what do we feel comfortable with some type of financing concern with that.
Brian and I have been having multiple conversations on this. Make him get his amortization table out, and we say, well, what if we want the payment to be this? How much do we have to pay up front? Those are things that we have to figure out. But interest rates are going up. Right now, they're 6.
I mean, that leaves us with $25.5 million if we pay for it all.
Right.
And compared to a $70 million budget,
Mhm.
that feels, I can see why you would feel that way.
Right.
But would we pay these when would we pay these costs? If you, because we don't pay, we don't sign the contract and
No,
turn
no,
over
no, there's progress
It would-
payments like all of these things.
Yeah, the vast majority of this probably wouldn't be paid off until at least a year.
Yeah.
You know, because obviously there's going to be
Yeah, that'll be.
design work and stuff, but
Same
as
with
far as the
auditorium,
cost,
It'd be 6 months, 6 to 9 months of design work. Start this around the same time as the middle school would start, but it would finish sooner, obviously, than the middle school.
And-
So
and the
you're a
only-
year and a half.
And the only way we replenish our general fund is by passing another operating levy.
correct,
So we're paying for this one way or the other.
correct.
Either out of current cash balance funds, it puts us in a precarious situation,
Right,
makes you nervous, our treasurer.
Correct.
Makes me nervous.
And
Yeah.
then you go to the community center for operating.
So,
most likely.
so that's why I mean, the nice to have and the needs to have are the things that are on my mind consistently. Because I said from the very beginning, I saw these renderings. Where's he at? I mean, I think that is beautiful. There were, the first ones you presented, congratulations, they were. I mean, who couldn't fall in love with that? Even these today, which have been scaled down and pared down, are just phenomenal. The Robins in the weight room, again, I challenge anyone in this community, just take a step in there. Just do a tour. No one has to even walk with you except to say, Aaron can say, watch out for that 45 there, because it's the only place we can put it up against the wall. Like I've seen it before, and it's dangerous. I think that that's a little bit of an easier thing to encourage people to go see, is the weight room piece in the Robbins building. I do think we need to be really, really careful about the auditorium, I mean, the multipurpose. I think it would be a phenomenal thing to have. I played, I understand having to wait till 9 o'clock at night, and guess what? The varsity's not waiting that long. That's, the younger kids are waiting that long. That's just a tough place to be. I would be encouraged to see how other school districts, Charlie, you mentioned your district. I don't know how that compares to this district, but I'd love to know how many other multi-purpose auditoriums are littered across public schools in the tri-state area, just so we can have more information to say, hey, we, not only is our weight room behind times, but the fact that we don't have a multi-purpose facility is almost unheard of for a school our size. I don't know that.
Yeah.
But I have to tell you, it doesn't sit well with me, not because we don't need it and I wouldn't like to have it. It's just, can we pull it off? Can we afford it? I don't know right now. It makes me uncomfortable too. And I love all of it, by the way. I love it all. Charlie, do you have a comment about other schools?
No, there's just two general comments. One is you know, the student body here, you guys are knocking on about almost 6,000 students, right?
6,700.
6,700.
Right?
There you go. You know, I've grown up in Cincinnati. I've always thought of Milford as 3,000, 4,000. 6,700 students is you're getting into a high number. I work for a district in Hamilton County. They have about 5,000, 5,200, and their high school has 7 gym floors, and their junior high has 3. And so so think about that. Your quantity of gym space is very under compared to a lot of the other teams you're competing with, the districts. So that's the thing that I've had to come to grips with when I know Milford today is you're over 6,000, and there's some more amenities that you need to offer to have with that quantity of students and participation in extracurriculars. So one other comment just on, Jerry, you brought up donations. You know, in my profession, I've seen donations of podiums with someone's name on it. I've seen donations on circulation desks in media centers. And we've seen, you know, a theater named after somebody with a large donation. So you guys have talked about that with the theater. I wanted to address that we've seen the variety, and brass plaques can be a fairly small contribution from your side to get a nice return. So Miami University actually is the one where they almost have toilets donated with plaques on them. So lockers are donated, and the locker rooms are called the so-and-so locker room. So it's honestly endless what you could do if you wanted to go down that path.
Yeah, I would encourage us to do so. The Dave Miranda value engineered restrooms.
There you go.
He's got gold toes. And our,
On a marquee.
thinking about athletics, the numbers at the junior high, middle school are exploding when I
Yeah.
hear. And so that's great, but that's, that means 6 years of kids coming in, and this is space that they would have access to. I just think a well-rounded portrait of an eagle is students, when we give them opportunities to do other things, outside of robotics and dance and, all of the things that we're encompassing across these two.
You don't have to sell me on the idea. The idea is awesome. I love the idea.
Love it too.
I just, someone's gonna pay for it, so that's perfect.
I would just echo what Charlie said. We have 2 other clients right now that we're working with on a conceptual phase that are doing the same thing with donations. They have tiers from $300 to $300,000, 20 different tiers of donations, and they've marked it out and identified by line. Here's what you can buy. You can buy, like you said, a desk. You can buy a floor. You can buy site furnishings. You could buy a scoreboard. You could buy all kinds of different things. And they just identified it early enough to where everybody can just kind of pick and choose what they want to do.
I mean, there's probably brick campaigns that have been wildly successful. I've seen that happen as well. I'm just thinking about ways to lessen the burden on the district. I mean, and we're foolish not to think about these things. For us to just think, let's just find a way without these options, I think is foolish.
Is there a do you guys have a foundation?
Yes.
So, and I've seen a lot of foundations run, the fundraising drives, because it can be,
Brian, what's the ratio from the state, general fund versus revenue, that starts to put us on the radar? Is there a formula that they say you're starting to get into fiscal caution?
They look at your 5-year forecast, and when they look at your 5-year forecast, when you first get on the radar is when you're 3 years out and you're showing a negative cash balance. That's when they start looking at you.
And current run rate with the deficit spend over 3, with this coming out,
Yeah, we would probably be 2 years out, them looking at it off the top of my head,
so I can see why.
without any type of influx of cash.
So nervous, indigestion, all of those things are coming for you.
Right.
Yeah.
What if we went through a financing process?
I mean, obviously, financing helps with that. You're not taking that big chunk out. But then it comes down to what's that financing look like? What's that interest rate look like? What's the term? What are the back end fees of that? So yeah, that's some of the conversation that we've had to get started, to try to figure out what's the best way to do it. I know we've mentioned COPS bonds in the past. You've got that route. You've also got a direct placement route. If you can find a bank that's willing to do that, there's some couple other options that we're looking at. Some of it comes up to, can you find the right bank or investor to work with you on that? So we're kind of early conversations in those phases to see what that would look like if we went down that path.
Because the cost of money keeps going up, and it will continue to go up as inflation rises over the next 24 months or so. I mean, I'm not an economist, but I don't think you have to be
Right.
too bright to notice that. The money's still gonna, I mean, there's still a cost to it. It's gonna eat up every bit of our, every bit of the interest we're earning on all of our current investments. I'm just thinking about the cost of that loan is not zero.
Right.
Are you able to refinance these capital projects as interest rates get better like you can in other places?
There's points in time that you can't just say, oh, today I refinance. There's points in time in the cycle that you can do certain
Okay.
things.
I just don't know that instrument as well, the larger public school.
Yeah, when you get into
projects.
public
I just don't
financing,
know that as well.
you're
Well,
a
it
little bit more
depends on,
restricted.
too, what the life of the building is, and how long you can finance it. And Brian has been working with people on that, correct?
Yeah, we've kind of talked about that. Obviously, when you're looking at bricks and mortar, like the middle school, what they tell you is, useful life term is 40 years. This isn't going to be that type of building because a lot of it is going to be a pool barn type thing. So what does that look like? You're obviously not going to get 40. Could you get 30? Could you get 25? Could you get 20? Those are more possibilities as far as taking out any type of loan if you wanted to push it that far out.
we're pretty good at extending another 10 years past useful life. That's what I've learned. So we'll get our money's worth.
We'll move down to the
Yeah.
400.
Good
But I-
luck with that.
Yeah, well, when I say that, it's just a matter of how long are they gonna let you borrow the money for?
Yeah, yeah. What are the typical loan terms?
That's what they say, could be all over the board.
Oh, so you can get them for 30-something?
You could get, yeah.
Oh,
He said
wow.
that's a,
I didn't
talking
know.
with them, it is a possibility
I
that you
didn't
could
know
get
you
a
could get
30-year.
So if you're-
Because that was, like I said, bricks and mortar, like the middle school, 40 is the max we could go. But obviously with this one being part brick, part, pool barn, you can't get it for 40. What can you get it? And like I said, they think you could probably get to the 30, 25, 20, definitely. So yeah.
So,
So then if you mortgage over that period of time, and I haven't seen the amortization table, but you may be talking $1 million, $1.2 million per year as opposed to
yeah,
10 or 11 out all at once.
no prepays, because eventually we're gonna have to pass something, so we might be able to chop a chunk off. I'm just thinking through how
Right.
to make this happen. If we cut a gem out of that 3, I have to believe it's not exactly a third of that 4.1.
Yeah, if you were to go to 2 gyms, you're correct. It's not exactly a third.
I
Yeah.
think that side was about $200 a square foot, just under 200, so it's about 7,000 to 8,000 square feet per gym.
So we'd want to take out the middle to keep our costs low, the middle gym.
And then, the stadium bleachers, how long can we push those out if they weren't part of this? I know, we need to get his chair over there.
Jeff, you're sitting in the wrong spot tonight, man.
He knew.
It's hard to say. It was 6 or 7 years ago. We had some students get a little rowdy on a Friday night, and they all like to do their jump up and down, which, sorry, Arian, that drives me crazy, but they literally bent a number of the seats that we had to replace. We were able to find parts, new seats basically, to replace those, but I can tell you it was a challenge. So I'm not going to say, and we have, matter of fact, we're going through our annual bleacher inspection right now, and every year we get a report from an engineer about all the things that need to be tweaked and retightened and things along those lines. I'm not going to tell you it's a year or 2 years or 5 years, but those bleachers are getting to the end of their life cycle. And you also have, I don't know if any of you have been in those stands with little kids. When my son played football, my granddaughter was little. They're open. You go to the newsstands and, I don't let my 2-year-old granddaughter climb all over the place, not worrying about it. When my son was playing, one of us was like holding her like this, the whole time that she was in those stands. So those are they're also not ADA compliant. There's some other, bigger bleachers allow some bigger events. There've been discussions of having, we've started just in the last year or two kind of having a preliminary band competition, but there's talks of, we get a better press box, it's higher, it's more seats, that we could host some events. We talk about fundraising. I mean, my kids weren't in band, but in talking to Josh and some of the band people, those are huge fundraisers, that we would have the opportunity to do. So there's a life cycle issue, and then there's an opportunity issue that's there as well. Aluminum right now is all over. It's crazy. I mean, and again, I think the budget we were given from Dan Clayton reflects that. The last thing, you go ask somebody for a budget, the last thing they want to do is tell you it's going to be $1.5 million and it turns into $2 million. So they would rather tell you it's $2 million and it turns into $1.5 million. Now, I'm not telling you that the 1.9 that's up there or on your sheet is going to be significantly less than that, because again, the aluminum market right now is just, it's one of the real hot buttons out there as far as materials and costs. So does that ever settle down in a couple of years and it's a little more reasonable? I'd like to say yes, but I'm also a realist that usually when things go up, there's not many things other than gas that tends to come back down and kind of goes up. And once it goes up, it usually stays there for a while, you know, so.
In the range of the number you got, we use the higher number.
Yeah.
It was 1.6 to 1.9. We put in 1.9 to make sure everything was covered. Obviously, if it was done sooner than later, it could be in the 1.6 to 1.7 range.
So is this for both sides?
No, this is
No.
just
home side?
the
home
north
side.
side was done in 2017, the one closer to the swim club. Nothing needs to be done to that one. This is to do the south side. And when we do that, that south side would go back to being the home stands.
Yeah, I'm still calling that the home side, and that just shows you, I was right there with you in the 60s, going to high school there. And does this include press box as well?
Yes. And it includes a potential, it's not, it's ADA access to that press box. It is not an elevator. We're not gonna build a great big,
Artist
you know,
elevator.
block structure and put in a elevator like you see at the high school or Boyd and Sitebelt. It's more of a big, long ramp and then a lift kind of thing to get there, but it does include ADA access to that press box.
I have a sort of a left turn question. I have a question about materials. We talked about in that multi-purpose room having a rubber floor. Can you talk to me about like the lifespan of that rubber floor and if there were any other materials that were looked at besides wood that could be useful in that multi-purpose area?
Life cycle cost, you know, one of the things with wood floors is they have to be screened and refinished at least every other year, realistically every year. And that's what the only time we have not done our wood floors every year was when we failed a levy back in 12 or 13, whenever it was. The elementary buildings, we kind of did every other year. So that's a cost that would be saved. Overall, I don't know what your thoughts are as far as the overall life cycle, but the ongoing maintenance is not nearly as significant with a multi-purpose floor as it is with a wood floor.
Yeah, the name of a product is actually Robbins, R-O-B-B-I-N-S, sports flooring. They're down by Terry's Turf Club, the
Yeah, right
cheeseburger
across the
place. Cincinnati Flooring and Robbins is there, and so it's you know, it's recycled tires, and then they pour a product on it that seals. So you see in a lot of like fitness and health clubs on tracks. So it's cleanable with basically water, and they're tasked to live with at least 20 years with normal wear and tear. And again, low overhead. If you want to go below that, you can go to like a sheet good product. It's a rolled good. We do that. We do that in elementary gymnasiums. Again, lower amount of use as far as the wear and tear. But those are your kind of like basic level, VCTs is there down there, and then rubber flooring, and then wood. And wood also has a wide range of the support that's below it.
And the wood is not just the wood, it's the HVAC system that goes along with that, because you have to maintain a certain humidity level with the wood floor, otherwise you get issues that go on with that. So the rubber floor is a great middle of the road.
Yeah, rubber could be, if someone's, in this facility and they leave a door open and it goes down to 50 degrees, the rubber's gonna be fine. If it goes to 100 degrees, the rubber's gonna be fine. Wood becomes very challenging.
Isn't it fair to say over 90% of the multi-purposes that you put in are all rubber floored?
Oh, yeah, hands down. Yeah, we would,
I haven't ever seen one that wasn't,
yeah, correct.
but I've only seen about 10, so I got a small end.
It can take cleats, rubberized cleats and not show the wear and tear.
So, I'm looking up here at your building, and the left-hand side, the purple side, is a two-story structure, correct?
Mm-hmm.
The right-hand side is a single-story structure.
Mm-hmm.
What if you stacked some of that?
You could.
Is there a savings there, or is there a cost?
In this situation with a pre-engineered metal building, there is not a savings. There's probably a cost because of an elevator, stairwells. You'd have to have, second floor toilets. So stacking that in this situation would cost more money. And also, it'd be really tall for a field house. So you're about 14 feet here. Oh, excuse me. It's about 14 feet. 12 to 14 feet, and then that's about 24 to 28 feet, so it would be more expensive.
Okay, just curious.
Can we go back to the layout of the, I think it was what, where the junior high showed with the,
That,
so where does the gym fall on the footprint of the junior high, which side is it?
there's 2 gymnasiums within the footprint. There's one smaller gym, and then we've got locker rooms, and then there's the larger gym, which is about 10,000 square feet. So the larger gym is about this size. So backwards. So there's 3 gyms. 1, 2, 3, 3 courts basically.
3 courts, 2 gyms.
Yeah.
So you've got your main court with 2 side courts, kind of like we have at the.
So the courts that we have in the purple there, on the other thing, those are full-length courts.
They're at least 85 feet. I got to see if they're up to 94 for high school. Yeah, yeah. So I believe they're 94, but I would double check.
Okay.
I mean, generally, this is more of a high school use. Most ADs, basketball coaches, like the bigger gym for just the conditioning that kids get rather than the shorter gyms.
I'm getting down the weeds, I'm sorry.
Yes, please.
Sorry to interrupt. I just have a couple, at least creative funding opportunities. You may know, but our contract with Mercy Health expires this year. So we are beginning conversations of what that could look like going forward. And a big part of that bid process, which will probably open to possibly other companies, would be how do they co-fund this with us. I don't know the exact amounts. We're having conversations right now. We hope to know by December at the latest what we're going to do. But I anticipate at least a decent sum, a lot more than we're getting now. And then there might be some creative opportunities with facilities like subleasing. If there's a physician's office in that building where they would pay a rental fee and sublease it. So there's some creative funding there, obviously with naming rights, lead sponsorship. So if you're looking at a financing plan over 20, 30 years, there could be some significant revenue to balance that. I doubt you're going to get, millions of dollars up front. Same with our athletic boosters. I'm sure they would contribute, but they're not going to be writing $1 million checks every year. It's just not possible. So something to think about as you process this decision. How can you co-fund it? And there's a lot of different ways you can do that. And we're already having those conversations. Just don't have concrete stuff. Obviously, a big part is where do we want to go with this first? So just want to throw that out there that we've looked into that and are looking in that process.
Is our timing good for doing it like next year? Is it fortuitous for us to have our contract coming out and going into negotiations?
I think it's a perfect
for next
timing.
Yes.
So we're ready to move on it soon. We don't want to wait till May to make that decision. We'd like to know this fall or early winter. So that might be perfect in conjunction. We're already starting to toss numbers out. So I've already seen some, we got to meet with some, other people. So we're beginning the process.
When do we need a decision on this?
Charlie?
So, we are looking for a decision on specifically the Robins and the weight room, within the month of July. We need a direction to say, okay, we're going to replace it and put it here. As far as the major buyout, which is the construction buyout, it would be, probably first quarter of next year. That's the larger commitment. So, we could go down a path starting to design the second half of 2022, and by January, February, March, depending on just scheduling and things, we could say, okay, here, we're going to go bid it. In this case, we would do it through Conger. Conger can provide the board GMPs, guaranteed maximum price, in chunks, so it's very typical. It's basically phased approaches. So
I'm trying to understand the two decisions you just mentioned. What, the first one is?
Decision
agreeing-
number one is we're gonna replace this SHP and continue to move forward with basically, the middle school footprint. And as Jeff mentioned, we just got the survey done, I think last Friday. I just got the official survey. Stormwater is a big deal. And so when we showed this, we said, well, stormwater is gonna be buried right here. We're gonna have to bury it. It's triple the cost to bury stormwater than it is to put it above ground. So if we can get a green light from the board to say, okay, we're gonna replace these, move this building, and we might move it east, 50, 60 feet, which would then allow us to have some above-ground stormwater storage, which is gonna save money on this building. We haven't priced it yet. I don't know if you want to spitball.
It'd be six figures, I mean, it's, you're not, it's not 10,000, it's 100,000.
Yeah, but that also doesn't help us, correct, Mr. Ray? If we save $20 million there, we don't have $20 million to spend on the nest.
Yeah.
Because it's got to go back into the school.
Correct.
And at the end of the day, the middle school, the nest, the auditorium is money the district's going to spend. We are already looking at saving every penny we can on this middle school. From a square footage standpoint, we have to be LEED compliant. We obviously have to build a building that's going to be adequate for what we need for a 6-8 middle school. But we are already looking at trying to save every single dime that we can in order to be able to do that because of the way, some of the things that Bob's talked about with some of the bids that they've had go out recently and the square foot pricing they've had, I'm not gonna lie to you, it's scary. We got our work cut out for us to build that middle school for the budget that we've got. There's no doubt about it. We'll do it, but it's gonna be a lot of hard work.
So Charlie, the first decision, and Jeff, you're probably right there with them. If we signal to you as the board that we're seriously considering something in this space, but we're not committing to $10 million right now, or tomorrow, or in August. But that space is likely gonna be, we could likely signal that we should probably plan on something there, and if we don't build the multi-purpose and we only move forward with maybe a skin and bones wrestling concession, but on the same footprint, how does that disrupt you in any way if we signal that? Because the commitment is probably not gonna happen in July.
Yeah, it would give us an indicator that okay, we have a little more freedom to move this building for some of the decisions. We would then start actually designing this. This is all I have. I've got this and I've got these images. That's all we've done. We would start to really lay things out. We'd call the county, hey, we're gonna do X amount of seats. Where can we fall within the toilets? We'd start to really program this and really lay this out and get answers. Everything to date has really been done off of one sketch. So in the fall, we would produce real drawings in various phases. We'd come here, present them. We'd know how much plumbing at a later time. We'd know how much foundations at a later time. So
With real cost
Yeah.
estimates. Yeah, that's the big part of this is done in our office through current track records, what we've done in the past, what we're doing now. If this project were to move forward, we would get further drawings from SHP, and we'd actually get subcontractor input about what's going on in the market right now. And we'd have real subcontractor input on what the costs are for this at a SD level and at a DD level and a CD level to finally do a GMP. That's where it would get a little more tighter and your pencil would get sharpened more as you start moving through there. And maybe it's an $8 million project to do the whole thing versus $10 million when you look at where the design falls into place and you don't have all the contingencies in there.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Charlie. I think, so to answer Mr. Combs' question, what does the board need to direct us to do here in July? I think the answer is that the current weight room and Robbins building are going away, or they're not going away. If they're going away, what are we going to do to replace those facilities? That, we've got a little bit more time in. But what we need to know now, essentially, is an agreement that the weight room and Robbins building are going away. And then we got to figure out what to do with those spaces.
Yeah.
Fair? So I think that's the immediate question we need direction on.
And what I heard was, if they don't go away, then we're going to underground water storage, and that's gonna be a cost of approximately, axe handle,
Hundreds of thousands of dollars.
hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And I think we're also going to, underground versus above ground stormwater retention is the most obvious thing, but there's gonna be other things that come up very quickly with site circulation, safety, how are we getting people in and out, where do our parking lots go? We've got these two 40 to 50 to 60-year-old buildings, you know, do we have to stay 60 feet away from them? Those buildings aren't sprinkled. You know, code impacts. So there's other things that will come down the pike that we don't really know yet that will be affected if those buildings don't go away. Stormwater retention is the big one that's easy to see right now.
The obvious one. Yeah, Jeff, you know, if you say, you know, Thursday, I know there's a board meeting, you guys could come to a decision. Hey, we're keeping those buildings, we're living with them, figure out the floor plan. We will have to then go and figure out all the impacts of that. And having those two buildings right there, that's the thing I did not put in this rendering, but, you know, this is a new middle school right here. Right here is the old, it's the weight room, and then right here where that tree is where the Robbins building is, so.
Charlie, the question I have for you is, should the board decide to remove the buildings, when do they need a decision on blue, purple, or both? Or something else?
I mean, so blue, purple, or both, we would need a green light to say, hey, start to lay these out and go to schematic design. And so schematic design is basically 1/3 in. And so I would engage civil engineers, I'd engage architects, interior designers, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and we kind of would have about a 1/3 set. I'd say that could be, you know, October, November. Here you go. We've taken this to the next level. We'll give it to Conger. Conger will go out and do another estimate. At that point, there'll just be so much more information there to make the decision. You guys can then say, hey, stop on purple, proceed on blue. Or you can say, hey, we like both, you know.
Yeah.
Well,
And
when do,
this will get updated?
That would be updated with new dates, yep. Yep.
and when would we have to swing the axe on them?
Swinging the actual axe would be probably when they start site work, which would be about a year from now.
So you've got another season?
Yeah, you guys got a whole school year using those still.
So,
Yeah.
you know, this is helpful, and
Okay.
Jeff, thanks for bringing that decision to a point. John, you pushed it as well. Because it's much easier for us to say, those buildings have to go, than it is, we're gonna go spend $10 million.
Yeah, the 10 million is
And I know it could be 8, it could be
Yeah.
whatever, but we need to understand through Brian and some of the financing and Aaron's magic, I just pinned you to all of that. Not even 90%, it's all on you, to try to get that done. That's why I think it's so much easier for us to make a decision, the 5 of us, on the buildings go or not,
Yeah.
versus anything else, yeah?
And the only thing to say there is, I don't want to see an artist rendition, even if it has no trees and everything is very bare bones, with a bus garage up against the side of a new middle school.
I'm glad I brought that up then.
Just the only thing I would add, and I know it's getting late, and the only thing I would add is just remember that if the direction is that these two buildings go away, I don't know what it's going to look like, and there's a lot of options, and we can work really hard, but something is going to have to replace them. We don't have current space to move the people and the activities that use those spaces that we currently have. Something will have to replace them if they go away. There's a lot of options, but it's something.
Yeah, it's not gonna be zero, to be clear. Yeah.
Okay, so I heard Charlie say that he needs a decision this month. So that gives you a few days to the next board meeting, or you have to have a special board meeting the following week.
I'm out of town the following week.
And Emily's
Do
out of
people
town.
need-
the
Is
following
3
week.
days enough for people to think about?
I don't think I have to think anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, I think 3 days is enough, John.
Okay.
Put it on the agenda.
I
We'll,
do too.
we'll put, I'll formulate with Brian and Jen, and we'll get something on the agenda.
Tomorrow.
It'll be on the draft agenda that
And-
goes
and-
out tomorrow.
And to make it super clear on the agenda what we're voting on, right?
And
Yes, I'm going to put on the agenda that we are going to demo those two buildings, and then you're going to
Yes or
vote.
no?
Yes, it's a yes or no, it's clear.
Are
It's
we
not
demoing
ballot
these
language.
These two unsafe buildings, yes or no? Oh, it's not a vote
right.
yet.
Very good.
Okay, that sounds like temperature. We've got a little bit
Yes.
of temperature there. We still need to do some work.
I heard Brian use temperature too. He likes it.
Brian, we need to lay out a half dozen of different options and what they might look like, given the numbers that we've got right now to work with.
Right.
And,
Like I said, we started the process, so now we got a better idea of which way to go with it and take a look at it.
we could have a fundraiser to level the bus garage in the Robbins.
sell sledge swings?
I just don't think you could sell pieces of it.
Our athletic director is my new best friend.
Okay, it's been a good evening. We've accomplished a lot. We've learned a lot.
Thanks to all of your work, helping us understand a little bit better.
And we've got a lot to think about still, but I think we've reached some resolution on some things, so. Does anybody else have any other comments here? Okay, the next board meeting is Thursday night at 6 o'clock in this room. It's a regular board meeting, July 21st. And I now need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Call a roll.
Mrs. Nolan? Mrs. Chestnut?
Yes.
Mr. Combs?
Yes.
Mrs. Mason?
Yes.
Mr. Miranda?
Yes, thank you.